survivor, born in Hungary. My dad was born in 1933. Coincidentally, 1933 was the same year that Hitler came to power. That's when he became Chancellor of Germany. They with some violence, they pushed aside the Kaiser. Hitler came to power very quickly. They made laws banning the Jews from many activities and racist laws against the Jews. The famous laws were the Nuremberg laws that were passed in 1935. Martin Luther King, he told us that we always need to remember everything the Nazis did was legal. They passed laws for all their evil plans. So the Nuremberg laws were passed in 1935. My dad in Hungary was a little bit different. Hungary was an ally in World War I. Hungary was allied with the Germans, and Hungary was having good relations with the Nazis. Hungary's leader was Nicholas Horthy. It's a fascinating historical figure, Nicholas Horthy. He tried to appease Hitler. He tried to be on good terms. He was trying to do what was good for Hungary at the time, and in his eyes, if he could appease Hitler and be on good terms, he could benefit the Hungarian nation. That's what he tried to do. I don't see, at least personally, Horthy is very controversial because he was appeasing Hitler, but in my eyes, I don't believe that he was as evil or as wicked as the Nazis. I think Horthy was trying to save Hungary from the Nazis. But so Jews were being exterminated across Europe, especially in the Baltic countries, in Poland especially. But in Hungary, the Jews were still relatively free. There were racist laws passed in Hungary. Again, Horthy was trying to appease Hitler, so he allowed racist laws to be passed in Hungary. And when my dad was growing up, you did encounter, as a child, anti-Semitism. People would yell slurs like "dirty Jew" when you were walking to school. But still, it was
in the middle of the street, so as that they should not be able to throw stones or rocks at my head as I walked to school. The school was 2 blocks from my house. My father was the rabbi of the city called Szeged, the second largest city in Hungary, and we lived in relative peace till the Germans invaded Hungary.
How old were you when you were walking to school and you were afraid?
I was 5. I go to kindergarten, and that's when it started, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew.
So Horthy managed to keep the Nazis out of Hungary until 1944, which was almost towards the end of the war. But at that time, then the German army, the Wehrmacht, invaded Hungary and took over. And when they pushed Horthy aside, they put in place of the Hungarian leadership and the Hungarian parliament. They put in place vicious anti-Semites, and the Nazis told the Hungarians now they have to start deporting the Jews to the concentration camps and the gas chambers. If I recall correctly, the Nazis came into Hungary in March of 1944, and by June of 1944, it was May of 1944, the deportations were already starting. Very quickly, the Nazis rounded up Jews and put them into the ghettos, but where you lived was already part of the ghetto, yes?
Where we lived, my father was the rabbi of the city called Szeged, the second largest city in Hungary to this day, and they already had a lot of experience, the Nazis, and they started to deport the Jews immediately.
And when the Nazis first came into Szeged, how did they start terrorizing the Jews?
They put everybody into what was called a ghetto, means a special neighborhood for Jews, and it was locked up, it was surrounded, and I know many times, because I was a kid, I could jump the fence and go to the city to pick up certain things. Like I remember one famous jump that I had to do. There was a child from a neighboring city that was locked up in our area, and he had, by Jews, they circumcised their boys on the 8th day of birth. And I had to get some clothing and material for the ceremony, and I jumped the fence, and I came back. My parents spoke about this day and night for many, many years.
So you risked your life to jump over the ghetto wall to buy some diapers?
Exactly, and we made the ceremony in the dark. We did not put the light on in the temple.
And when the Nazis first came into Szeged, how did you know that they were there? How did they announce their arrival?
They announced their arrival by coming in on motorcycles, and they enjoyed making very big noise as they drove around the city. It was in a very scary manner, and that was enough to scare you. And they did that for about an hour, and I remember running into my house and telling my parents, we are finished.
And then the deportation started. That was in May of 1944. People all of a sudden started vanishing. Where did you think that they were going?
We knew it's not a good place. They took everyone to concentration camps, but we still were kept in the dark, and we did not know that that's a place where you do not return from. And once you got to one of the concentration camps, they would kill you, sometimes right away. And that's how they murdered both my grandparents, who were prominent rabbis in Hungary, and I lost a few hundred people in my family because of the Holocaust.
In the extended family, it was a large extended family.
The largest rabbinical family in the world.
And so between May of 1944 and July of 1944, about 437,000 Hungarian Jews were deported on trains, most of them straight to Auschwitz, a concentration camp in Poland, and sent straight to the gas chambers. By then, the Nazi machine had become very efficient. They were really good, quote unquote, at what they were doing, and they were able to process and kill thousands of people each and every day. What did the Nazi propaganda do in order to fool people, to make you think that there was no television, there was little communication, no social media? How did the Nazis fool people to make them think that, maybe they're not going to be killed?
They made us feel that we are leaving, but we are coming back. And in fact, there were people who arranged their lumber, in Europe you heated your homes with lumber, and they arranged it in a certain way to fool people. Everything was done to fool everyone. And we all thought we are going there for a short vacation, so to say, like you go to a vacation home in America.
And so there was an anti-Semitic slur, a lie, that they said that Jews don't do manual labor. So how did the Nazi propaganda machine, how did they use that lie in order to fool the Jews?
They told us that they only teach us how to work with our hands. They said that we are a lazy nation and we don't work, and they only want to teach us how to work with our hands, to do plain, simple labor. And once we learn a trade or a profession or a labor, we will be brought back home.
And were there even postcards?
There were also postcards, and everything seemed rosy, like you go on a summer vacation here. And that's not how it was.
So the Nazis had people write postcards back home to say, oh, we're in a good place, and everything's fine, and you'll enjoy it here. When people were deported, they packed up their luggage as if they're going on vacation or to some work rehabilitation. You know, they packed up like you would pack up to go.
As if they would go to Orlando.
Yeah. So, my family, my dad and his immediate family, they were fortunate. They were part of a group that was ransomed out of Hungary. There was a fellow, Dr. Kastner, a Jewish fellow in Budapest, who approached the Nazis. He saw an opportunity to ransom some Jews at the end of the war because the Nazis saw that they were losing, and some of the Nazis, they wanted to be able to escape with their lives and with some money. So he made a deal with Adolf Eichmann, who was head of the SS in Hungary, to ransom a certain group of Jews in exchange for a large sum of money. And he raised the money overseas, mostly from Jews in America, to ransom those Hungarian Jews. My dad was deported in June of 1944. He was on a train that was going to Auschwitz, but then those Jews who were part of that ransom group, they were taken off that train and put on another train to go to Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was also a concentration camp, but it was not an extermination camp to the extent of Auschwitz. Auschwitz was just, by that time, purely an extermination camp. Bergen-Belsen was a horrible place, the horror of which is beyond any imagination. But it was at least that group they kept them alive with the bare minimum substance. So the deportation to go on the trains. Oh, how was that?
The trains were very crowded. You had to sit on the floor, but at least there was a little space to sit, and it took a few days to get to Bergen-Belsen.
What was it even sitting, or most people just had to stand?
Most people had to stand. There were no sanitary facilities, and it was a terrible ride. And we got to Bergen-Belsen.
And you, as a child, you mentioned that you felt at one point that you were suffocating.
It was terribly crowded. They would take a cattle car and they would put 100 people into that car, and very tight and very frightening. And it's a miracle that anyone survived the ride itself. But thank God, we were meant to survive, and we arrived in Bergen-Belsen around June 1944, and we were promised to be liberated for money, about $6 million. That was a lot of money at that time for a group of 1,700 Jews. And around January 1945, they woke us up in the middle of the night that the money arrived and you will be liberated tomorrow morning. Line up at 6 a.m. and you will be liberated.
So you knew that you had reason to believe that you were going to get out, that you were going to be ransomed, but how did you feel in the camp itself? Did you actually have any hope of ever getting out?
In the camp itself, we lost hope completely. They gave us enough food to survive, but not to be satiated. And we even, for our immediate group of 1,600 people, they also gave us permission to pray. Some of the very emotional high holiday prayers I learned in Bergen-Belsen as a child. We saw also a few hundred rabbis, and we had services every day, and especially during the high holidays. I still, to this day, sing those prayers that we prayed, that we used during the high holidays.
So how is it possible to pray in a place like that? And how can you have faith?
It was really very difficult. However, because we were liberated, that is really the secret weapon that created the state of Israel. The modern state of Israel was born as a direct result of the Holocaust, because the Jews decided that enough is enough and we have to have our own country, and they moved to what was then called Palestine. It was under the jurisdiction of the British, who were not helpful at all. They were very anti-Semitic also, but we prevailed, and with the help of God, we established to this very day a strong army with a lot of enemies surrounding us and trying to murder us, and they could not prevail.
So I'd like to, I know it's probably getting late, so I want to set aside time for questions. So if anyone has any sort of questions, yeah, please.
Do you ever feel like God
A
abandoned
bit,
you?
I'll hear it now. I'll see it over.
Did you ever feel like God abandoned you during that time?
Do you ever feel like God abandoned you in that time?
Not me, I was a kid. I was 11 years old, but I remember everything. But most people felt like that. Yes, most people felt abandoned by the heavenly authorities. But now we feel different.
Thank you.
So you said you lived in like the ghetto zones of your city in Hungary when the Nazis took over. Did you ever have to avoid guards of the Nazis?
The question is, did you lived in the ghetto? Did you ever have to avoid Nazi guards?
I was careful not to walk on the sidewalk when I went to school, but that's how everyone walked. And if I would go to school, the people or my neighbors would open their windows and scream, "Dirty Jew." And that's the way I avoided the Nazis, by walking smack in the middle of the street, so I should not be near them because they would hit me.
And then, so that was I think before the ghettoization. But then, did you have any encounters specifically with Nazi guards, with Nazis? And you have come to face, you were face to face with Nazis in the camps and even before. What were some of the experiences face to face with Nazis? Maybe in the morning roll call.
Well, one special experience I had was that they had this crazy idea to disfigure women, and they would shave their heads, and they would scream and cry. It was a horrible experience for them, and there was like a window open, and the people told me, "You are a kid, no one will bother you. Go over, find out why are the women screaming." And I went, and a Nazi guard saw me, and they would hit me very hard. I feel it some way to this day on my back with the edge of their rifle, and that's something I remember to this day.
So just for context, that was part of the deportation process. The train made a stop, and they stopped off in a German city called Linz, and they took the women and shaved their heads. And like Dad said, they sent my father, because he was a kid, just to see why are all the women screaming and crying, and then a guard hit him with a rifle butt. Yeah. Any other questions? Please. I'll take the one here and then the one in the back. Yes.
Did you ever witness anybody who's really close to you be taken into one of the camps or be killed?
I'll take that. I think I'll take that question. Well, actually, I'll ask because, okay, did you ever witness anyone close to you taken to be killed? So I don't think you saw, because your immediate family were together, but you did see from where you were in your part of the camp, which was you were kept, in a different part of the camp because you got better treatment because you were part of the ransom group. But you could see over to the other part of the camp. What were you saw the Polish Jews who were being forced to do slave labor? What was happening to them?
Well, they were really miserable. We did not have prayer books, and we smuggled some cigarettes that we had. The means of exchange in a concentration camp were cigarettes. In those days, in Europe, everybody smoked. Even kids started to smoke in high school. When I came to America, I started a first grade high school, and I thought I would be a big shot, and I'll take a cigarette and start smoking. And just one puff made me cough, and that was the first puff I took, and the very last one. I did not smoke. Today it's not fashionable anymore for high school kids to smoke. At least where I live in Brooklyn, I don't see them smoking. I see them do a lot of things, but not smoking. and that's good.
Now it's vaping, but but so the Polish Jews, what were they? Those who were in the forced labor, what were they being forced to do?
They were supposed to go to one end of the concentration camp, fill it with all types of garbage,
Fill a truck.
fill the truck with garbage, bring it to the other end of the camp.
You mean drive it to the other end of the camp?
No, push it. Push the truck to the other end of the camp, unload it, and then reload it, and bring it back to the other end of the camp to where it came from. Again, fill it up and unload it.
And what happened if they paused in their labors?
Well, during the high holidays, we Jews, we have what we call in Hebrew the shofar. Does anyone know what the shofar is?
The ram's horn.
The ram's horn. On the New Year, Jewish New Year, called Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar. And I remember in our camp, we bought a shofar for the means of exchange in a concentration camp. Does anybody know?
Yeah, cigarettes. But so what happened so in your camp, you had the privilege, because you were treated better, you had a shofar, you were able to blow it, and so the slave laborers paused to hear the shofar sounding, and then what happened to them?
They were beaten mercilessly till blood came from them as they stopped to listen to the shofar. That's a major obligation for Jews to listen to the shofar during the high holidays. And they hit them till blood came out of them.
Thank you. And gentleman has been patiently waiting in the back, or is it a woman?
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, I'm a girl.
Sorry.
Kind of answered my one question, but I'll just go on to another one. So the Polish people were treated different than the Hungarians was my one question. And the other one was why was your father's group special? Why were they kind of ransomed as opposed to some of the Polish?
Sure. So it's just it's historical coincidence that the Nazis invaded Poland right at the beginning of the war in 1939, and they came up with their plan for the final solution, and they began the extermination of the Polish Jews earlier in the war. The Nazis did not actually invade Hungary because
Till the end.
Right till the end, until 1944. At that time, it was very clear to many of the Nazis that the war was lost, So they were willing in Hungary, the local SS in Hungary, which was the chief of it was Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann was willing to cut a deal to save some Jews in exchange for money, because he needed to escape with his life, and he and his henchmen, they wanted some money so that they could go. They ended up escaping to South America. Eichmann ended up in Argentina before he was captured by the Israeli intelligence agency and brought to trial in Israel. But so Eichmann and some of these people, they escaped to South America with this ransom money that they got. And this group, it just coincidentally, the fellow who cut the deal with Eichmann, his office in Budapest was near the office of my great aunt. And so when he was looking for names he had 1,600 people or so to save. So he just went around and said, okay, I have a deal with Eichmann, I can save some people. If you have relatives, put them on the list. And so my great aunt put the names of her family on that list. So it's just, God saved them through this coincidence. But it was too late. But it was too late for the Jews in Poland or other countries for that. Eichmann was only willing to make this deal because he saw the war was lost.
Did all 1,600 make it to America?
They made it to, there's an exhibit here about the DP camps, the displaced persons camp. They all ended up, that 1,600, they went to January of 1945. Before the liberation, they were taken out of Bergen-Belsen and to a displaced persons camp in Switzerland. And then from there, they went to various countries. It was, America immigration was not open. It took time. It took 2 years for my dad and his family to get a visa to come to America, and even that was only because they had other family members who sponsored their emigration to America. Others went to Israel or South America or Canada or any other country that would have them. Thank you. All right, any other questions, please? Please.
I know, I hope, you didn't see this yourself, but I must ask, did you ever witness, while in the camp, did you ever witness, people being taken away to be, beaten, senseless, or, beaten, or, perhaps killed? Did you ever witness that while in the camps?
In where my dad was, they, because they were being kept for ransom, they were not targeted for that type of extermination. The Germans, they were treated horrifically. They were given very poor rations of food, and my grandparents, they gave the rations to the kids, to my dad and to my dad's 2 siblings, and they had, it was terrible conditions, very little sanitary, there was very little water, there was for a couple of hundred people, there was one latrine, one bathroom, but they were kept alive. They were not targeted for extermination because Eichmann wanted to get his money. Thank you.
I just want to apologize. I think the group here, the students who are here, their transportation is here, so they're going to have to. So if you're not here with the student group, feel free to come up front if you'd like to ask any questions. But I'd like the students all acknowledge. Thank you, Rabbi Jungreis.
Thank you so much.